Imagine you just got the best news of your life. Your family has secured you a position at the court of King Henry VIII. You are going to serve as a lady-in-waiting to the new Queen of England, a young woman named Katherine Howard. You will live at Hampton Court Palace, one of the most spectacular buildings in the known world. You will wear fine clothes, eat rich food, and stand just a few feet from the most powerful man in Europe. Your family is thrilled. Your future is set. You have no idea that within 18 months, this job will put you in a torture chamber, a prison cell, or a coffin. But before we get to the blood, we need to understand exactly what you are walking into. Because the thing about serving Katherine Howard is that the danger was not obvious, not at first. At first, everything about this position looked like the opportunity of a lifetime. The year is 1540. Henry VIII has just married his fifth wife, and the court is buzzing with fresh energy. Katherine is young, probably around 17 years old, though nobody knows her exact birth date. She is lively, attractive, and the king is completely obsessed with her. After the disaster of his fourth marriage to Anne of Cleves, which lasted about 6 months and was never consummated, Henry is acting like a lovesick teenager. He showers Katherine with jewels, lands, and attention. He calls her his rose without a thorn. The mood at court is light, everyone is smiling. And you, as her new lady-in-waiting, get a front row seat to all of it. Now, you might be picturing something like a personal assistant, carrying the Queen's train, maybe fetching her embroidery. The reality was far more intimate and far more suffocating than that. As a lady-in-waiting at the Tudor court, you essentially lived inside the Queen's private chambers. You slept in her rooms. You helped her dress in the morning, layering on the chemise, the kirtle, the gown, the sleeves, the hood. You attended her at meals. You accompanied her to chapel. You were present during her private conversations. You knew when she was happy, when she was sick, when she cried, and when she received visitors she probably should not have been receiving. And this is where the job starts to get dangerous. Because in Henry VIII's England, knowledge was not just power. Knowledge was a death sentence. Think about the world you are operating in. By 1540, Henry has already executed one wife, Anne Boleyn, on charges of adultery and treason just 4 years earlier. He has divorced another, Catherine of Aragon, and essentially started a new religion to do it. His third wife, Jane Seymour, died giving birth to Prince Edward. His fourth marriage to Anne of Cleves was annulled after 6 months because he found her so physically unappealing that he could not bring himself to consummate the marriage. His chief minister, Thomas Cromwell, the man who had arranged the Cleves marriage, was beheaded just months before Catherine became queen, partly as punishment for that disastrous match. The message from the throne is crystal clear. Nobody is safe. Not queens, not ministers, not archbishops, and definitely not the women who wait on them. You also need to understand what happened to the women who served Anne Boleyn, because that story was still fresh in everyone's memory. When Anne fell in 1536, her ladies were hauled in for questioning. Some of them provided the testimony that put their queen on the scaffold. Lady Worcester, one of Anne's closest attendants, reportedly made statements that helped launch the investigation. These women watched their mistress be arrested, tried, and beheaded, and they knew that any one of them could have easily shared her fate. By the time you arrive to serve Katherine Howard, every woman at court knows this story by heart. It is not ancient history. It happened 4 years ago. Some of the same people are still walking these corridors. The Tudor court at Hampton Court Palace was not some peaceful country house. It was a surveillance state dressed in velvet. Thomas Cromwell may have been dead, but the network of spies and informants he built was very much alive. The Privy Council had eyes and ears everywhere. Servants reported on their masters. Ladies reported on their queens. And the men who ran the government, people like Thomas Cranmer, the Archbishop of Canterbury, understood that the fastest way to destroy a political enemy was to find out what happened behind closed doors. Your doors. The Queen's doors. The doors you were responsible for guarding. So, here you are, a young woman from a noble family living in the Queen's apartments at Hampton Court. You are surrounded by beauty and luxury. The walls are hung with tapestries that cost more than your family's entire estate. The food is extraordinary by the standards of the day. You are close to the center of political power in England. And every single day, you are collecting information that could get you killed. Because Katherine Howard has secrets. And you are about to find out what they are, whether you want to or not. Before Katherine ever caught Henry's eye, she lived in the household of the Dowager Duchess of Norfolk at Lambeth and Horsham. These households were supposed to be finishing schools for young noblewomen, places where they would learn the social graces, needlework, music, and manners expected of girls from powerful families. In practice, they were barely supervised. The Dowager Duchess was elderly and often retired early, leaving the young women and men in her household to their own devices after dark. The girls shared a dormitory, and at night, young men from the household would sneak in. Food, wine, and company flowed freely once the Duchess had gone to bed. It was, by all accounts, a chaotic and permissive environment that would have scandalized anyone at the royal court. Katherine, who was probably around 13 or 14 at the time, became involved with a music teacher named Henry Manox. The nature of that relationship is debated by historians, but Manox himself later admitted under interrogation that things went further than music lessons. Then came Francis Derham. Derham was a gentleman in the Duchess's household, and his relationship with Katherine was far more serious. They called each other husband and wife. They shared a bed. Multiple witnesses later testified that the relationship was fully intimate. In the social conventions of the time, some historians argue this may have actually constituted a binding pre-contract of marriage, which would have made Katherine's later marriage to Henry technically invalid. Now, why does any of this matter to you, the lady-in-waiting? Because several of the women who witnessed these relationships at Lambeth ended up serving Katherine at court. And once Katherine became queen, some of these women followed her into the royal household. Joan Bulmer actually wrote to Katherine asking for a position, and some historians believe this was a veiled threat. Give me a job, or I might talk about what I saw. Whether it was a threat or simply an old friend hoping for advancement, the result was the same. Katherine brought Bulmer into her household, which means that sitting in the Queen's private chambers, helping her dress, attending her at dinner, were women who knew exactly what Katherine had done before she married the king. And knowing that information was like carrying a lit torch in a room full of gunpowder. You need to understand how treason law worked in Tudor England to appreciate how terrifying this was. Under the Treason Act of 1534, it was high treason to do anything that could endanger the succession. If Katherine had a sexual past before her marriage to Henry, and if that past included a possible pre-contract with Derham, then her marriage to the king might be invalid. Any children she bore him might be illegitimate. The entire succession could be thrown into chaos. And anyone who knew about this and failed to report it to the king was guilty of misprision of treason. That meant imprisonment, loss of all property, and potentially death. So picture yourself in this position. You are a young woman from a family that depends on royal favor for its survival. You have just learned, through whispered conversations and the loose talk of former Lambeth household members, that your queen had a sexual relationship before her marriage. Maybe you overheard Catherine Tilney or Joan Bulmer talking about the old days. Maybe one of the other ladies let something slip after too much wine. However it happened, you now possess knowledge that the king does not have, knowledge that could destroy the queen, knowledge that could destroy you. Do you report it? If you report it, you betray the queen you swore to serve. You destroy a young woman who has shown you nothing but kindness. You throw your own family's political alliances into chaos because the Howards are one of the most powerful families in England, and they will not thank you for bringing down their golden girl. But if you stay silent, and the truth comes out later, you are guilty of concealing treason, and the punishment for that is death. This is the impossible calculation that Katherine Howard's ladies-in-waiting faced every single day. There was no safe option. There was no right answer. There was only the question of which kind of destruction you preferred. But the situation was about to get much worse, because Katherine was not just hiding her past. She was actively creating new secrets in the present. Sometime in the spring of 1541, Catherine began a dangerous flirtation and possibly a full affair with a young courtier named Thomas Culpeper. Culpeper was a gentleman of the king's privy chamber, handsome, well-connected, and exactly the kind of man that a bored teenage queen trapped in a marriage with an aging, obese, increasingly ill king might find attractive. Henry was 49 years old. He had a chronic ulcerated leg that produced a smell so foul that courtiers could barely stand to be near him. He had gained so much weight that he could no longer mount a horse without a mechanical hoist. Catherine was 17 or 18. She had been married to this man not out of love, but because her uncle, the Duke of Norfolk, needed a Howard queen on the throne to secure the family's political position. The emotional distance between Catherine and Henry was enormous, and right in the middle of this disaster was Lady Jane Rochford, one of Catherine's senior ladies-in-waiting. Lady Rochford, the widow of George Boleyn, who had been executed alongside Anne Boleyn in 1536, acted as the go-between for Catherine and Culpeper. She arranged secret meetings. She stood guard outside doors. She carried messages back and forth. Whether she did this willingly or under pressure from the Queen is something historians still argue about, but the result was the same. Lady Rochford was now complicit in what the King's government would later classify as treason, and she was not the only one. The other ladies in Catherine's household could not have been blind to what was happening. When the Queen dismissed her attendants late at night, someone noticed. When Lady Rochford was absent from her usual post, someone noticed. When Catherine received visitors in her private chambers at unusual hours during the royal progress through the north of England in the summer of 1541, someone noticed. The question was never whether the ladies knew. The question was how much they knew and what they were willing to say about it. During that northern progress, the court travelled through some of the grandest houses in England. They stayed at Pontefract Castle, the same fortress where Richard II had been murdered over a century earlier. They visited Lincoln and York, and at every stop along the way, Catherine found opportunities to meet with Culpeper in private. The meetings often happened at night, sometimes lasting until 2 in the morning. Lady Rochford was always nearby, and the other ladies, sleeping just on the other side of a door or a thin wall, could hear more than they ever wanted to. If you were one of those women, lying awake in the dark at Pontefract Castle, listening to whispered voices and footsteps on stone floors, you were experiencing something close to a waking nightmare. Every sound was evidence. Every silence was complicity. And you knew, because you had seen what happened to the women who served Anne Boleyn, that when the reckoning came, nobody would care whether you had participated or merely failed to prevent it. In the eyes of the law, knowing and not telling was the same as doing it yourself. The reckoning came in November of 1541. It started with a man named John Lascelles, whose sister Mary Hall had lived in the Dowager Duchess of Norfolk's household alongside Catherine. Mary told her brother about Catherine's youthful indiscretions, and Lascelles, either out of genuine concern or political calculation, reported what he had heard to Archbishop Cranmer. Cranmer, who had his own reasons for wanting to weaken the Howard family's influence, brought the information to the king. Henry did not believe it at first. He ordered a quiet investigation, expecting the allegations to be disproven. What happened instead was an avalanche. Cranmer began systematically interrogating every person who had ever been close to Catherine. The ladies-in-waiting were questioned one by one. Some were interviewed gently, at least initially. Others were threatened with torture. The goal was simple: extract every detail, every name, every date, every incident, build a case so overwhelming that even the king could not deny it. Francis Dereham was arrested and tortured on the rack at the Tower of London. Under extreme pain, he admitted to the relationship with Catherine, but insisted it had ended before her marriage. Then he said something that changed everything. He suggested that Thomas Culpeper had replaced him in Catherine's affections. This shifted the investigation from a question about the Queen's past to an active case of adultery during the royal marriage. And adultery by a queen was treason. Now imagine what this meant for you, the lady in waiting. Cranmer's investigators are working through the household methodically. They have already spoken to Catherine Tilney, who confirmed details about the Lambeth days. They have spoken to Margaret Morton, who described the late-night meetings during the Northern Progress. They have spoken to Joan Bulmer, who panicked and tried to distance herself from everything she had witnessed. One by one, the women who served Catherine are being brought in, questioned, pressured, and forced to choose between their queen and their own survival. When it was your turn, you would have been taken to a private chamber, probably in the Tower or at one of the government offices in London. Seated across from you would be Cranmer or one of his senior clerks. They already knew most of the answers. They were not looking for information so much as confirmation, and they were looking for inconsistencies, because anyone whose story did not match the emerging picture was assumed to be lying, and lying to protect a treasonous queen was itself treason. The pressure these women faced was extraordinary. They were not hardened criminals or political operators. They were young women from noble families who had been placed in a position they never asked for, given knowledge they never wanted, and now faced consequences they could not escape. Some of them broke down during interrogation. Some tried to minimize what they knew. Some told everything immediately, desperate to save themselves. Catherine Tilney, in particular, provided detailed testimony that helped build the case against her queen. The interrogation rooms in the Tower of London were not designed for comfort. They were cold, dim, stone-walled chambers where the sound of your own voice bounced back at you from every direction. The rack stood in the basement, and even if the investigators did not use it on the ladies themselves, the threat was always present. They knew Derham had been stretched on it. They knew what had been done to him, and they knew that the men asking them questions had the authority to do the same to them if they believed the answers were not truthful enough. The psychological weight of that knowledge alone was enough to break most people, and these were women who had spent their entire lives in sheltered, noble households where the worst thing that could happen was a social embarrassment at a banquet. And through all of this, Catherine herself was falling apart. When Cranmer confronted her with the allegations at Hampton Court, she became hysterical. She screamed, she wept, she alternated between denial and confession. There is a famous story, possibly true, that she broke free from her guards and ran down the long gallery at Hampton Court, trying to reach the king, who was at prayer in the chapel. She was caught before she reached him and dragged back to her rooms. That gallery is still called the Haunted Gallery today, and visitors to Hampton Court sometimes claim to hear her screams echoing through the corridor. Catherine was moved to Sion House and then to the Tower of London. Her household was dissolved. Her ladies were scattered, some to prison, some to house arrest, some simply sent home in disgrace. But the legal machinery was not finished with them. In January of 1542, Parliament passed a remarkable piece of legislation. The Act of Attainder against Katherine Howard included a provision that would have terrified every lady-in-waiting in England. It stated that any woman who married the king while concealing a dishonorable past was guilty of treason. But more importantly for the ladies, it also declared that anyone who knew of such a past and failed to disclose it was equally guilty. This was retroactive legislation designed specifically to punish the women who had stayed silent about Catherine's history. Think about what that means. Parliament literally changed the law to make sure that the women who had served Catherine and kept her secrets could be charged with crimes. The message to every future lady-in-waiting was unmistakable. Your first loyalty is to the king, not to the queen, not to the woman you dress and feed and sleep beside every night. To the king. And if you forget that, even for a moment, you will die for it. Thomas Culpeper was executed on the 10th of December, 1541, at Tyburn. He was beheaded, a mercy granted because of his status as a gentleman. Francis Derham was not so lucky. He was hanged, drawn, and quartered, the full punishment for treason. His body was cut into pieces while he was still alive. Catherine Howard and Lady Rochford were executed on the 13th of February, 1542, on Tower Green, inside the Tower of London. Catherine was probably around 19 years old. According to accounts from the time, she was so weak with terror that she could barely stand. She had to be helped onto the scaffold. Lady Rochford, who had reportedly suffered a mental breakdown during her imprisonment, was executed immediately after. And what about the other ladies? The women who had been questioned, who had given testimony, who had been locked in rooms and threatened and forced to betray the person they were supposed to serve. Most of them survived, technically. Catherine Tilney was released eventually. Joan Bulmer was imprisoned for a time but later freed. Margaret Morton disappeared from the historical record, which in Tudor England sometimes meant a quiet death and sometimes just meant that nobody important cared enough to write about you anymore. But survival did not mean safety, and it certainly did not mean that life went on as before. These women had been publicly associated with a disgraced and executed queen. Their families were tainted by the connection. Their marriage prospects were damaged. Their reputations were ruined. Even the ones who cooperated fully with the investigation, the ones who told Cranmer everything he wanted to hear, carried the stain of having been part of Katherine Howard's household. In Tudor England, association with a traitor was almost as damaging as being one yourself. No amount of cooperation could fully wash that away. Consider what this meant in practical terms. A lady-in-waiting's entire future depended on her reputation and her family's standing at court. A good marriage, a comfortable life, the education and placement of her own future children, all of it hinged on being seen as trustworthy and loyal. Once you had been publicly interrogated about your role in a queen's treasonous behavior, that trust was gone. It did not matter that you told the truth. It did not matter that you had no choice. The whispers followed you everywhere. She was one of Katherine Howard's women. She knew. She was there. And this is really the point of everything we have been talking about. Being a lady-in-waiting to Katherine Howard was not just dangerous because of the executions, though those were real enough. It was dangerous because the position itself was designed to be impossible. You were expected to be completely loyal to the Queen while simultaneously being available as a witness for the King. You were supposed to be intimate enough to serve her most personal needs, but distant enough to report her most personal secrets. You were a companion and a spy, a servant and a potential prosecutor, all at the same time. The Tudor court was not a place where you could keep your head down and do your job. Every meal, every prayer, every late-night conversation was a potential piece of evidence. Every friendship was a potential liability. Every act of kindness toward your queen was a potential act of treason against your king. And the penalty for getting the balance wrong in either direction was the same. Your property seized, your family disgraced, your body on the scaffold or rotting in a prison cell. So the next time you see a painting of a Tudor lady-in-waiting, standing serenely in the background of some royal portrait with her hands folded and her eyes downcast, remember what that calm exterior was hiding. Remember the secrets she was carrying. Remember the calculations she was making every single hour of every single day. Remember that her beautiful dress and her place at court came at a price that most of us cannot even begin to imagine. Katherine Howard's ladies did not choose to know what they knew. They did not choose to be placed in the middle of a disaster that had been building since before they were born. They were young women from ambitious families, pushed into a world of violence and betrayal and political calculation that would have overwhelmed anyone. And when the storm finally hit, there was nowhere to run. There was no one to trust. There was only the question that every single one of them must have asked herself at some point during those terrible months. How did it come to this? The answer is simple. It came to this because they took a job that looked like a privilege and turned out to be a trap. A golden, jewel-encrusted, silk-lined trap with no way out. So here's a real question. After everything you just heard, do you honestly think you'd last a single day in Tudor England? Because we took that exact question, along with hundreds of others, and turned it into something brand new. It's called the Tudor England Survival Guide, and it's the closest thing you'll find to an actual survival manual for the most dangerous court in history. How to read a room full of spies. How to dress a queen without losing your own head. What to eat, what to wear, and most importantly, what you should never, ever say out loud. We just opened our store, and this is the very first time we're telling anyone it exists. To celebrate the launch, we're running a special offer for a limited time. which means right now you can grab it for the lowest price it will ever be. Just scan the QR code on your screen right now, or tap the link down in the description to get your copy. And once you've had a look, come back and tell us in the comments how long you really think you'd survive.